I'm Leonard Scott Collins, and this is the Qabalah of Twin Peaks, where I try to interpret the numerical symbolism of Twin Peaks through the lens of the Hermetic Qabalah, just because that's the numerical system with which I'm familiar. I did just finish watching the second half of the pilot, so good for me. I'm motoring along. But I have some more thoughts about the 5 and 12 that I spoke with you about last night. Remember, Twin Peaks is 5 miles south of the Canadian border and 12 miles west of the state line. So we said yesterday that the 5 pointed to elemental magic, but if you look at your tree of life, there are 10 emanations of God, and that's Kever Chokma Bina Chesed Gevura is the 5th one, and Gevura is related to the planet Mars, a fiery, warlike planet. Some people get very disturbed by visiting with it. And there's going to be lots of places in our pilot where we point at Martian Gevura by color or in subtle other ways, and of course the violence of losing a child, not just for a family but for a whole town. That's not much like Mars in the Sephira Gevura, but it is very much like Mars on the Path of Pei, the Tower card that shows a tower getting struck by lightning. So established order being destroyed by an act of God. And then the 12, we already talked about how the number 12 points at zodiacal magic, and we talked about the watery signs of the zodiac, which are important because it's 12 miles west of the border and in the outer order of the Golden Dawn and some other ones, you put water in the west. Later, as you go up the tree in the Vault of the Adepts, for example, the elements move around slightly, but the most popular thing, because most people by far are beginners and never get beyond the early phases of initiation, is to put water in the west. But the number 12, also you have the Sephiroth of the Tree of Life, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then the paths of the Tree of Life, which connects all the Sephira, and there are 22 of those, one for each of the letters in the Hebrew alphabet. Aleph is the first letter, and Beth is the second letter. So the second of those paths, the 12th path overall, because when you count the paths, you include the Sephiroth, is the path of the magician, the path of Beth. The magician is the sort of the fool after his initiation, after several degrees of initiation, where so now the 4 classical elements are in proper balance under the supervision of the higher element of spirit, which I think was added to the system by Aristotle or before, so this is not a super modern edition. But so in the Magus card, those elements become the elemental weapons, the wand for fire, and the sword for air, and the cup for water, and the disc for earth, become tools that are of use. And so I think the reason I think it's interesting that the Magus card comes up so early by dropping that number 12, the 12th path of the Magus, saying Twin Peaks is right there, 12 miles west of the state line, that pointing to that Magus. I mean, in the international version of the pilot, where they give one version of what the ending for our story might be, you already have that poem through the darkness of future past, the magician longs to see. So we have some tarot references already, which make me think that this it lends some weight to our theory. I would say whether or not I think it's appropriate. All of the people in the town who are up to mischief, Ed and Norma and Bobby and Mike and something with a D. Laura's best friend there, Donna. They all meet at the Roadhouse at 9:30. 9:30 is a nice time to meet because it's not too late and it's not too early. You can have a casual drink inconspicuously at 9:30 and then go home when you're finished your business, and nobody realizes it's a business meeting because everyone is sort of in and out after work, after dinner at 9:30. But there's a curfew, supposed to stop the younger kids from going out at night. So how are the younger kids getting away with roaming the streets after sunset? Shouldn't they meet at a coffee shop in town to conduct their mischief, perhaps the Book House, instead of at a biker bar on the outskirts after dark, where they might not even be granted admission? They have to get in at 9:30 because the time 9:30 is symbolic. So maybe we are halfway between the 9th path of Yesod and the 10th path of Malkuth. Maybe we are on that little bridge, which is actually the 32nd path, or the 22nd letter of the Hebrew alphabet. The path of Tav, related to the planet Saturn, and this is a heaviness. This is the first place that the aspirant encounters a deep spiritual heaviness and emptiness, that silence we were talking about earlier, that daunting, limitless quiet, like lying on your back and looking up into deep space and wondering and realizing your own insignificance, okay? So, the path of Tav is important. I actually think what's going on with the town is much more appropriate to the path of Pei. All of their social structures have been exploded by not an act of God, but by the hand of a hungry demon. Or by Laura's dad, however you want to interpret it. And so there is a violence more appropriate to the path of Pei than to the path of Tav. But by nightfall, people are moving, at least superficially, through those phases of grief, and they might be crashing from the emotional output required to get through their just regular day. Sorry about the bath noises. I'm grinding my feet on the tub. So I've run the water too hot. We're at that intersection of water and fire. Engine oil, burnt engine oil becomes a key motif later on. Again, the intersection of water and fire, not substantial water, not, 2 glasses of H, 1 glass of O, but elemental water, the sort of liquid, dynamic, flowing movement, and that which is combustible come together in engine oil, especially burnt engine oil. So they meet at 9:30 because they have to. And if you drop that 0, you have 9393. Again, let's start with the basics and work out from there. 93 is the foundational number of Thelema, or a foundational number of Thelema, being by Greek, is isopsophy, both Thelema and agape, both the letters of the word Thelema. You substitute the appropriate numbers and add them up and you get 93, and then agape as well, you add them up and get 93, which puts a harmony between those two words, which mean, a Greek fellow I know said Thelema was most wanting, but in our spiritual system we tend to think of that as willing. the fundamental will, the will as a metaphysical principle, like Schopenhauer's will, the will of, which is the basis from which everything else is derived. And agape just means love. And so we have a pure will being expressed by Kyle MacLachlan, who is single-mindedly pointed at one thing, solving the mystery, and perhaps by some of the grieving parents as well, perhaps also by Leland Palmer, although his duality will become more interesting as we go along. But you could say that when he connects to his primalness and his pure willing Bob materializes, or you might not like that interpretation and come up with something else. I would understand why you wouldn't. So, I mean, these questions of love and will, let's call it free will for now, although that's not quite correct. These questions of the intersection of love and free will, there's no dichotomy there. Don't misunderstand me to think that there is. Love just is will, and will just is love, according to the Thelemic doctrine. But the places where love and will collide and seem to be different, how you could both love your daughter and murder her, for example, these are thematically appropriate to Twin Peaks. But the bigger thing that it does is just indicate to us, so we see the number 93, and we remember that Mark Frost likes to read Kenneth Grant, and we remember that Kenneth Grant is sort of a weird, unorthodox Thelemite, and we remember that Jack Parsons is in The Secret History, who is also quite involved with Thelema, if you want to put it mildly. And so there is a justification for using the Hermetic Qabalah, and not some other kind, not Hebraic or medieval Christian Qabalah, but a very modern Hermetic Qabalah deeply influenced by Thelema for navigating the numerical system of at least Mark Frost, if perhaps not David Lynch. 9 and 3 are weird together because when you go up through the grades, if you're in the 10th Sephira of Malkuth, just beginning your journey, you've finished your probation, you're 0-0, and you move up to the 10th Sephiroth of Malkuth, you're in your first proper grade. So the way they express that is 1 equals 10. First grade takes place in the 10th Sephira. And 2 equals 9, 3 equals 8. And so as you go up, the numbers always add to 11. The numbers that are supposedly equal always add to 11. And so 9, 3 adds to 12. Again, another pointing over at the zodiac, but also perhaps 9:3, which is how you would write the time, looks very much like 9 equals 3, which would be a grade sign, and it's a bad grade. It's a grade that doesn't exist. By the time you're in your 9th grade, you should be all the way up in the 2nd Sephira, not the 3rd. And a friend of mine who used to do a lot of magic, a lot of demonic evocation specifically, and then some Enochian stuff as well, used to say that whenever he got a number that seemed to be a little bit too big, 1 too high, he thought there was something extra, something super added, something unnecessary for the proper working of the formula, and his ritual needed to be simplified before he could go on. What could the extra thing be in this? Maybe Bob. 1 body carrying 2 personalities. It does seem like something is extra. And something is added to 8-3 to create 9-3. Okay, so the 8-3 is the basis we're going for. It's a very, very, very high grade of magical initiation, which in the AA corresponds to the carving off of all of the elements of personality, all of the elements of intellect, all of the elements of self, all of the projections, the belief that objects are objects in relation to you, and encountering objects as they exist in themselves, which Kant tells us that's an impossible thing to do. So it's the grade in which one becomes a master of samadhi, and for periods of time, at his own will, the aspirant is able to have this deep personal experience. I won't say deep personal experience of God, but this experience of non-existence in relation to God or something. And the way we talk about this is that we've cast off our personalities, we've cast off our bodies, we've cast off our blood. All of our blood has been dissolved in the cup of Babylon, and what we're left with is just a little pile of dust in the city of the pyramids. So this pyramidic pile of dirt, which is Laura's monument, you know, in the train car where she was murdered. Somehow left behind is a little pile of dirt with her broken heart necklace sitting on top. So we're pointing at this very, very deep phase of initiation by these sorts of symbols. You know, I mean, why would it need to be on top of a pile of dirt? Why couldn't it just be found, right? So the pile of dirt gives it significance, and I think this significance is the transcendence of the self, the dissolution of the self into, right? There's a phrase that I want you to look up on your own called erotic destruction, I think. The way a person loses themselves almost in the same way during sex, and there can be healthy erotic destruction and unhealthy erotic destruction. And the way Laura is left adjacent to this big attainment, but not maybe in it, because something was extra. Bob was extra. She didn't lose herself completely, which is why she's partly trapped in the lodge. I want to point to a great moment that is this traffic light in absolute darkness, turning from green to yellow to red. The tree of life. Green is the 7th Sephira, yellow is the 6th Sephira. Very, very important attainment in the 6th Sephira. This is where you meet your own personal holy guardian angel and develop, this time I will say, develop a personal relationship with God. I mean, this HGA that you meet, it's you, it's your highest you, but it's more not you than it is you. It's more God than it is you. And there's a relationship between the aspirant and the angel that develops and sustains in the 6th Sephira. And then we move on from there. When we become a senior adept, we move on from there to Gevura, which is where we subdue the demons. And so while Laura Palmer is working perhaps on her 8-3, maybe Dale is working on his 5-6 or his 6-5. I don't know, but there's a point thing there. Indications of both of the major attainments in thelemic progress. Those two major points, if I can reiterate, being the knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel and the crossing of the abyss. And then later, when that traffic light is shown, it isn't showing changing color. It's shown a little too long sitting at red. The reason I wanted to point this out is not to do Qabalah on it, but just because in Fire Walk with Me, we'll see James Hurley on purpose run, I think, that same red light. Laura jumps off his bike, shouts at him for a whole bunch, maybe gives him a kiss, I can't remember, and then disappears into the woods. And James Hurley just wants to control something because he's so lost control of his friend who's lost control. And so he waits for the light to turn red before he tears his motorcycle through it. This is importantly, a traffic light close to the Palmer household. It's where they were going. James was trying to drop Laura off at home, and something spooked her. Maybe she saw her dad was there or something, and instead of letting him take her home, she ran off into the woods. In the pilot episode, we don't know any of that yet, and we won't for a couple of years, because Fire Walk With Me won't come out for a couple of years. But that traffic light is used at least once as the establishing shot for the Palmer household. That last moment where Sarah Palmer is lying on the couch and has the vision either of herself from that morning panicking about lost Laura, or has the vision of, like, I guess, Dr. Jacoby retrieving the necklace from the woods, and then she freaks out. The establishing shot for that moment is the red traffic light, even though we don't know that it's a light near her house yet. We never see the external house in the pilot, so I'll have to talk about that later. But their address number is also a significant number. Thanks for watching. I'm Leonard Scott Collins. This has been the Qabalah of Twin Peaks, the second half of the second 2/3, I guess, of my discussion of the pilot of Twin Peaks according to the numbers.